There was a particularly dumb, mean-spirited, and bad faith attack yesterday on Twitter that we wanted to bring to you. So Kamala Harris had tweeted out that all coronavirus testing and treatment should be paid for. Okay, good. Briana Joy Gray, who of course has been on this show and is National Press Secretary for Bernie Sanders, said, "This is a good start, but is it okay to die from cancer or diabetes because you're poor?" Fair question, and I think highly relevant during this time, asking the question of, okay, great, yes, coronavirus treatment should be covered, something we've been talking about here, but why should that get covered and not push people into financial oblivion? But if you happen to get a different disease, then sorry, you're out of luck. Why is one worthy of our support and the other, you're basically left out in the cold? So that's what Briana tweeted back. Seems like a reasonable response. Twitter, as it does sometimes, Saagar, lost their minds.
The K-Hive came for Briana Joy Gray. It was funny. I mean, Joy Reid had one in particular. We can throw her up on the screen. It's confounding. She has this awful personal experience. Many of us relate to her, believe come easily decades later. She agrees with Bernie Sanders. I don't remember that one.
Yeah.
Remember the whole raising the hand and then putting the hand down and saying, I misheard the question?
Yeah.
And all that. But it wasn't just her, Joy Reid. There were a lot.
Briana was trending on Twitter.
There were a lot of people. I even saw people.
Vitriol.
They're like comms people, aspiring comms people. This is the opposite of what to do. Like, you're supposed to be positive, not be a troll on Twitter. And again, we talked about this earlier in the show. It's when you criticize your own party and when you criticize your own establishment. That engenders more outrage and hatred than anything else you will ever do. And that's Briana's crime, is for calling out somebody in her own party, trying to hold them to a litmus test of the campaign, the central animating idea of the campaign that she works for. They're calling her a troll. They're saying she's a terrible person. All of this, all because she's going after Kamala Harris? Like, obviously they would go after Kamala Harris.
Right. Well, and it's always about the tone. The tone police always come out. It's never about the substance. Like, do you agree with her that everybody should be covered or not?
Yeah.
Let's have that debate. And the reason, the excuse that people gave for going so hard against Briana is that Kamala's mom did pass away from cancer, which is a horrible thing, right?
It's
and
terrible.
All the empathy in the world for her, but does that make it off limits for us to question whether someone else who may be dying of cancer deserves coverage and treatment and be able to go through that horrible situation without having to worry on top of it that they may go bankruptcy? Does that take that off the table forever? No. And the amount of outrage that is pushed against Briana versus the amount of outrage that any American would find themselves in that situation where they're going through a horrible medical experience and having to worry about their health and having to worry about their financial oblivion. Like, where's the outrage about that? But no, they love to fight on this. I mean, it's another part of the whole Bernie bro thing. They love to fight about the tone. They love to fight about say you're toxic, you're problematic, you're toxic, rather than actually have to deal with whether the policy is right or wrong. Because in theory, they're all supposed to believe that healthcare is a right and not a privilege. They all mouth those words, but when it comes down to it, they don't act like it. When it comes down to it, Joe Biden, who may be picking Kamala Harris as his VP, reports say, Joe Biden says he'd veto Medicare for all. So does he really believe that healthcare is a right or not a privilege? I don't think so.
Yeah, in my view, Bernie and his campaign's tone was never harsh enough against these people, and it should have been way harsher.
Yeah.
There is a decent section of the Democratic Party which hates the Democratic Party, and they should have mobilized that far more to their advantage, the way that Trump did in the Republican Party, because at the end of the day, what we saw with Trump is that all the suburban Republicans who had low favorables, guess what? They all voted for him. Every single one of them, because he made the stakes high enough and said, hey, I'll put Republicans on the Supreme Court. They said, fine, that's good enough for me. That was with a floor approval rating or a favorability rating of 30%. They might even dislike Bernie's tone and all of that, but they would have all voted for him at the end of the day.
Yeah. Listen, we shouldn't ignore the fact that Briana is a particular trigger for people, and she happens to be a young black woman. And, these are people who care a lot about making sure that people are treated fairly. They care a lot about racism, as people rightly should. But they seem to have a total blind spot when it comes to Briana, who, to your point, look, Sirota can be fairly aggressive online, but he also just will tweet C-SPAN clips and everybody will lose their mind about that. But Briana is a particular flashpoint, and I feel like her Twitter presence is very respectful, like very substantive and policy based. I can't think of any example where she's actually been nasty or personally attacked anyone online. So it's very interesting that she's one of the people that they go hardest after.
These are the same people who there was an article out recently which was like Trump often expresses ire, especially towards women, because they drew a dot that he criticized the CEO of GM, who is a woman, and the governor of Michigan, who is also a woman. And I'm like, so these are the same people. That's the stupidest story I've ever heard in my life, by the way, because he goes after Cuomo, the governor of Washington, of Illinois, whatever. They just leave those out. Same one on this. They're like, oh, wow, like he's going after women. We can't do that. And then, okay, young black woman works for Bernie Sanders. Boom, out the door. Troll, terrible person, blah, blah. Okay, let's hold you up to that. Let's hold you up to that standard. They don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care at all. Same thing on Jason Johnson. Were they really that outraged whenever professional wrong person Jason Johnson went after Briana and what did he even call her? It was the worst thing I'd ever seen. Even they didn't really say anything.
The island of misfit black girls. I mean, so horrible.
Racist.
So horrible. And I mean, she has never said anything that remotely approaches anything like that. And yet she trends on Twitter for making a valid policy point about healthcare in the middle of a pandemic, but that's over the line.
Yeah, I just love it. I mean, it just shows you these are the most hypocritical people on earth. They're the worst, and you know what? We should only express more of our hatred towards them.
And all they seem to care about is like tone when it's convenient for them. But
they use the same tone against anybody on the right. So
absolutely.
They don't care about
just look at my Twitter mentions and see how their tone is towards me or any other person who dares to challenge them.
There you go.
All right, we'll have more for you after this.